So if there's one thing I would like to bring across in the next 30 minutes, how to make all what we have heard today more practical. We have heard about theoretical results. Some of them might sound a bit depressing, inevitably of failure, right? But then once we narrow it down successfully, we can still make use of it. We have heard empirical studies, we have heard a lot of things that focus on data, on some of the algorithm portion, but I'm coming from a perspective, how can we use all of this? So a lot of you are from academia, so who's going to use all the results that you're producing? Well, my company happens to be one of those companies that needs that. So if you need an industry collaborator, if you need somebody to work with, or even to license out your software, so that's what TÜV SÜD is doing. TÜV SÜD is a testing, inspection, certification company. So if you need market access, if you want to bring your product to the market, if it's a self-driving car, if it's a medical device, you need to follow the laws, right? You need to have the proper certification in place. You need to show that your system is safe. And we are the ones who certify it. So how do we certify that? Well, we use tools that you develop. We need to apply those tools to practical examples. That is one thing that we directly can collaborate on. The other thing I should quickly focus on is we also form right now an innovation venture. We call it Accurus, and we are hiring right now. So if your funding runs out, talk to me. All right. Okay, with this introduction, let me just jump into the content properly. Title, Adopt AI. Yes, we have to do that, because otherwise we fall behind. But we shouldn't take the cat in the bag, right? We should leave the risk in front of the door. How do we do that? All of you are actually adopting AI, consciously or unconsciously. How consciously are you doing it right now? Who are you letting in your inner sphere? Do you blindly adopt some Google products, some Microsoft products, some other AI companies that give you models? How do you select the risks that are there for you personally? Or that your data might leak somewhere, that you might be discriminated against, and so on. Right? Do you actually have a conscious selection process for your meeting summary tools, for your translation services, for your grammar checking tools, and so on? The risk is even compounded for enterprises. Right? When an enterprise, an organization, needs to adopt an AI system, they need to carefully calculate the risks that this brings. And we are one of the companies that help with that. Right. We have heard that AI is changing the landscape. It does. Now, is it really? One of the risks that I have not heard much about today is performance. So some of the AIs are useful, others are less useful. Return of investment is one of the major risks for organizations that we also need to take care of. Loss of IP, loss of reputation, there's various consequences that organizations might face. It also have to be on the scorecard. So ultimately, how do we then adopt that? Right? So if you go to a purchasing department, I need a meeting summary tool. How would this purchasing department evaluate the various vendors that are out there? Who has seen in your meetings, online, Zoom, WebEx, Teams, somebody using an AI agent that automatically provides meeting minutes, provides summaries? Who has done that? 3, 4. You are AI researchers, what the hell? It's a limited number of people. Are you not trusting those tools? Why are you not using them? No? Alright, so in the end, there is various use cases that we all propagate that should make our life more efficient, that should have some actual value. We also need to make sure that they don't have any negative consequences with it. So how to do this, I will practically go forward here today. We all have seen slides like this, that language models are on an exponential trend, becoming bigger and bigger, and becoming more and more capable. I will not dive too much into the details there. So let's say if you, maybe 2 years ago, were making a pitch to Hollywood, I generate nice pictures. See my picture of Harry Potter in the top left corner. Would you have gotten any funding? Unlikely, right? So 2 years later, the story is very different. So we also have to predict a bit on what the future holds and how we can benefit from them. So what are now the benefits versus the risks of the technology advancements? And this is you as AI experts, what you have to provide to industry, right? You have to help shape how AI is used. We have to decide in what kind of world we're going to live in going forward. So, let's say we say AI is all the hype, and we just trash it, and we just go into the linear growth that we have done so far. That would be a couple of organizations that do this today. We all see these exponential growth curves that AI might bring in. So, we can argue about the years and when exactly what happened, never mind that. So let's say that is a single company that pushes the boundaries. What we actually have to look at, what is the set of all innovations that are out there, right? Like all models that push the boundaries together, right? That defines what is currently possible, and all of you are on the yellow line somewhere, right? You all bring new knowledge into the world, pushing what is possible. So now, this puts organizations in a bind a bit. If they don't adopt AI, they might have the risk of falling behind, not being competitive anymore, and ultimately closing the business. So to what degree should they adopt AI? If they follow the yellow line, they might actually also accidentally break things. Right, the OpenAI model, right? First release it, and if we break things accidentally, never mind, we look at this later. Also not the right approach. Right? So this distance we have to carefully analyze, and we have to decide what is the acceptable distance to what is possible. We have to tread carefully, but we have to move. Because the lower bar for a lot of organizations lead out of business. So all of you, with all the knowledge that you have to advise companies, what is this blue line? What is the AI strategy that they have? This is what we need to bring in. So with all the results that you bring here to the table on data quality, on hallucination, on model robustness, this defines what an AI strategy for an organization looks like. So this is what we have to keep in mind. Now, if we go too fast and we break things, in quotes, we might violate laws. We might violate IP laws, copyright infringements. And that is where the regulators will come after you going forward. So around the world, the governments are shaping up AI regulations. You might have heard about the Biden executive order. You might have heard about the IEEE Act. You might have heard about the China laws, or Canada, Korea. So all of you are not working in a nice vacuum, do whatever you want, right? So AI can be dangerous. And we have heard the entire day today, what are the risks about AI? So now that we know the risks, what are we doing about them? And legislation that shapes it. Right? Legislation puts boundaries on it. Legislation is a consensus process, a value system of what we deem acceptable use of AI. And every country can define that for themselves. What is acceptable in the European Union is very different from what is acceptable in China. Right? But at least we have a process of deciding what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So when you publish your research, keep this in mind. Now, AI risks are very different from classical software risks. So, right now, we not only look at memory safety and theoretical approaches, we look at societal consequences, we look at ethical concerns, we look at data security, data privacy. So the topic became very much not just a technical topic, but a socio-technical problem. A challenge statement that impacts us all. And we need to keep this in mind. Now, all of you are AI researchers. And if I now ask, wait a second, we have been using software for the last, how many years? 30, 40 years? And now AI is basically software. And software quality has been addressed before. So why am I now so concerned? What is now the fundamental difference of AI? Who of you would be able to tell me that? So if I ask you, I mean, now you all spent all your professional lives and researching AI safety. So what is different? Why do classical software quality approaches not apply here? Anybody have an idea? That is disappointing. Really? Nobody? Yes.
Predictability. Predictability.
Predictability. So you have a portion of determinateness, right? But that is one of them. So let me just summarize a bit on a very high level, right? So that you get a mental model on how we think about those terms. How can we, predictability, very good term, forecast what's going to happen? So let's say I can have a reductive reasoning. So let's say on the left side, I look at classical source code. Let's say the Microsoft operating system, somewhere in the magnitude of 300, 400 gigabyte of source code. On the left side might be a large language model, similar orders of magnitude in terms of size, in terms of raw binary data, might be 400 gigabytes of weights that are being stored. What is now the fundamental difference? If I have source code classical, I can break it down into its building blocks. And then I can predict what these building blocks are going to do. And once I understand those building blocks, I can then predict system behavior. Can I do this with AI? Not really, right? So if I build a house now, I can predict where this block is going to be in 30 years from now. Fine, right? Everybody agrees on that. So if we now look at those billions of floating point numbers in AI systems, well, what we are now doing in this room is we are describing it. We show like how the dunes move and how they build up the hills and how they might flatten out again. But can you really predict where a grain of sand is in 30 years from now? Impossible, right? And this is what scares people. If I cannot predict how a system behaves on a micro level, what can I say about the macro level? The optimists here come from the top down. They describe what the shape of the dune looks like, but they are unable to tell what a single grain of sand is going to do, what a single weight will have an impact on this dune. And there we have to have this bridge. How do we make sure that we have a bit more predictability like what we have on the left side with AI systems? And then we start analyzing where are those sources of risks, and where does this insecurity come from? Well, there might be various reasons for that. Technical, the large input-output spaces that have never been attempted before. Stochastical processes, where the order of in which you present training samples make a big difference. The initialization of your training parameters makes a difference. Right? All of this has an impact. What you see here is basically a root cause analysis. Everybody talks about transparency, explainability, and robustness. If you look at those terms, they are basically symptoms. They describe in what way an AI system is not doing what it's supposed to do. Please break it down. Where does it come from? Why can't you explain it? Why is it not robust? Right? Where did it go wrong? And then you see it's not just technical problems, but also organizational, process problems, data problems. For example, skill sets. If you have somebody who is not trained to do the job that he's doing, of course he will have problems downstream in the AI model. That is all challenges that need to be managed by an organization. So now we have to define what skills are needed to bring this in. How do we test those skills? That is part of the auditing processes that we as a certification company are providing. Because if you have those risks left, so then you might be out in a bind. I mean, some of you are founders, some of you actually found your companies and you are the CEOs out there. What kind of liabilities do you have? Are you standing with one leg in the jail already? Or potentially yes, right? Depending on like what laws are you violating. So there might be legal consequences for not taking AI risks seriously. Nobody might take this seriously. We have heard earlier this example of Tay, right? This Microsoft chatbot is an example that's obviously taken, right? Do you want to be the CEO that has to publicly apologize? Not really, right? I mean, some companies can survive that, others cannot. Then we have monetary business consequences that might apply. So all of this is part of what all our responsibility is to keep into a check of acceptable boundaries. Alright, that is very depressing, right? So now what do we practically do about it? One of the fundamental things is asking the right question. Right? And if you don't know what to do, then typically we go ask a friend. Right? We go and follow some guidelines. The problem with guidelines is, there's a hell lot of them. So everybody like publishes guidelines these days. Now what you have now to really do? Well, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just a list of guidelines that help you how to procure AI systems. Not even looking down into how you should manage your data pipelines, how you should address ethical concerns, how you should look at legal concerns, and so on. Right? So there's many, many of those guidelines. And I bet none of you have read all of them. So similar, I have not read all of the papers that you have written. So how can we bring this together? There's lots of information in those guidelines, there's lots of information in the papers that you have written about what are the fundamental risks, and how do we now make it practical for organizations, that they can use this knowledge as a resource to become better. And that is one of the things that we are also doing from an industry perspective. Right? Make sure that we can rely on the systems that we are using. Some of you flew in on airplanes, blindly trusting that somehow it works out and we will fall out of the sky. Right? In narrow operational domains, we can make systems safe. And that is what we have to do with AI systems as well. So every AI application has a very narrow use case. This use case defines its risk model. And based on the risk model, you have to put controls into place. So you need to know what questions to ask. You need to know, based on the risk model, what can go wrong and how do I address that those things do not go wrong. What are the due diligence that I have to do? This is part of the platform that we are putting together. I showed that, well, there are so many guidelines out there, nobody has read all of them. So many papers out there, nobody has read all of them. So the only solution is here really to use technology again, to make use of this knowledge. Can we now use a simple RAG application, throw all of those documents in some database and then ask it, hey, what should I do? We have heard hallucination comes out. That is not the right approach to it. So we need to have an intermediary knowledge representation that we can trust, at least in a narrow domain. We're not talking about infinite, all possible applications. We talk about very narrowly defined applications. That might be for a medical use case. It might be for an automotive use case. As long as you have a defined use case, you can come up with this finite risk model, and you can come up with the controls that you have to have in place to be able to enter the market and not violate any of the laws out there. So we have actually consolidated all of that in a quality framework. What we have put here on the top is what we call our risk profile. So everything that can go wrong is in those 6 pillars of risk. There is no other. There is no other quality characteristic that you cannot slot in one of those 6 pillars. So that is comprehensive. Every AI application will have a risk profile like that. Some might have safety concerns, maybe automotive. Some might have not safety concerns, let's say a meeting summary tool. All have some risks, maybe on the performance, maybe on the ROI, maybe on financial performance, and so on. But every AI application has a risk profile like that. Now then you break this down into where can those things from? How do I meet this risk profile? You do this within the process layer. That is the life cycle of the AI system. All the way from conceptualization to decommissioning. At every stage you put controls into place. And that all rests on, of course, what are the context information? What are the laws that are in place? What are the standards, industry perspectives, and so on. So if I drill down a bit more into this risk profile, because that's what we care about most. So that is defined by a set of defined characteristics. Those characteristics are diagnostic in terms of, are you having a risk in this pillar? So we have a list of 10, 12, 15, depending on the pillar of those risk characteristics, that if you consolidate all the standards that are out there, all the legislation out there, you will arrive at that picture. And so this is what my team has done over the last couple of years to put this framework together. The next step, putting this into a digital platform. And that's what we have done with this ICURS venture. So now we are able to take a specific AI application and then compute the risk profile. So we now can, based on the risk profile, generate the list of requirements that need to be fulfilled. That might be that certain tests need to be run. That might be certain organizational processes that need to be in place. So if you want to bring your AI systems into the market, this is what tells you exactly the list that you have to do. I will make a bit of a journey in the world of standardization. I know, right? So we are all AI researchers, and the overlap of people that program AI models and read standards is typically very low. Gary, a good friend of mine here, knows this binds that we're in sometimes, but this is what shapes the world at this stage. So the standardization world helps defining, substantiating what is acceptable. So if Elon Musk brings Tesla into the European market, who defines those rules? Gary does it. We. So we in the standardization will bring the insights that you have into this legislative frameworks. So in the European Union, it works as follows. You have high-level regulation. Let's say the AI Act. Nobody disagrees with that. What does it mean? What is in the AI Act? You should not discriminate. Right? You should not harm anyone's safety. Okay, everybody agrees on this high-level requirement. But now, how to specifically do that? This is then defined as a standard. For example, the AI Act will say, well, you need to have a quality management system in place. What does it mean, a quality management system? Then you look into the 42001. It's one standard that defines precisely what it means to have a compliant quality management system. This is just one of these standards. So then you have standards on data quality. I mean, we have heard so many talks about data quality these days, right? And this is maybe also a bit of a request from me to all of you. When we talk about AI, we need to have common definitions for the words, the terminology that we are using. And those standards define those things. When I read your papers, I see the words of certification and safety and trustworthiness used in so many different meanings, but they have defined terms. Use at least the standard 22989. Take out the camera phones and take a picture of this number. This has a list of terms that are commonly accepted. That is the international consensus, what is a model, what is a training data, and all those fundamental vocabulary to talk about AI is defined in those standards. So please use them. Become acquainted with them early, so that you don't have like this divide between the academic ivory tower and then the industry applications. So and then, when we have this approach under our belt, we can go into every detail of AI. We can define what trustworthiness means, how we need to address ethical concerns, how to do risk assessment, and so on. Right? All of those requirements are actually defined in those standards. The clauses in those standards are now the atomic building blocks, the requirements that we have to fulfill. For you to figure out and go into all of the standards to know that, it's a daunting task. Again, that's where platforms come in that, based on your AI application, bring out those requirements. Now, all right. So ISO is not alone in the world. There's a lot of IEEE standards as well, right? I think Gary and I, we work with both competitors, mostly internationally. So keep an eye out of what is out there in coming. Let me now use the last 2-3 slides to bring things together in a, let's say, practical application. So let's say you have developed a nice medical diagnostic algorithm and you want a hospital to adopt your algorithm. Safety critical domain. how do you use it? How do you make it practical? Right? The application might be for mental health systems, and so that you diagnose certain medical conditions in the person's brain. Based on this application, we can then define the risk profile. We can define what controls need to be in place. You can then show you have done your due diligence, and you can bring it to the market. Many companies have done it before. It's not an impossible task. It looks very daunting, but there is partners out there, very other companies that help there, bringing those systems into real world use. You don't have to be in this ivory tower. So in the end, what will come out is the risk profile, and then the hospital will see something like that. Now, the hospital will then compare the risk profile of competing vendors. What is my residual risk when I bring it into the market? How do we compute that? Well, there we need your tools. And so to know exactly the risks. So that is where we also have partnering programs. So also companies after they talk to me, if you want to collaborate on certain things, that is what you can always talk about. Let me just summarize very quickly. We need to adopt AI responsibly. Right? So everybody does it personally, and we also do it on an organizational level. We know that legislation is shaping up, and we need to be ready for that. So we are not living anymore in this ivory tower of we can do whatever we want. It's not about West anymore. But there is now provable pathway that others have used before to use AI responsibly. And that is, I think, an uplifting message, right? Where we have seen so many safety problems, so many challenges for AI systems. I'm saying the moment we narrow down the use case, we can make use of it. Thank you so much.